What's going on, my homies? Hanging out here in Fireballs, and I got some juice for you. You like fishing a jig? You like fishing a Texas rig? You like fishing a shaky head? Well, I got a little something for you. So I got my Monster Bass box this month. This guy, I get it every month, and what it acts as is a good reminder of things that I should be doing. And it came with these guys this month. These are Gary Yamamoto. They're a cut tail worm. It's the Magnum style. It's almost like a Magnum kind of trick worm or finesse worm. We'll call it a girth worm. That's what I like to call it. But it's a big straight tail worm. Perfect for this time of year. If you're not throwing a crankbait, you're dragging a soft plastic to catch these fish. And there's a rig that sort of combines all of these kind of cool things, a Tokyo rig, a football jig, even aspects of a Carolina rig that I don't think a lot of guys use to throw a big Magnum worm. And I'm gonna show you exactly how to rig it up, how to build it on a terminal, as well as how to fish it in this video. And I think you're really gonna like it because it allows you to fish this worm in a couple different ways that most guys are not doing. So hit that like and subscribe button for me. I'm gonna walk you through the steps. So the rig we're gonna talk about is old school, dude, and Tommy Biffle actually made it famous. It goes by a couple names. It's called a wobble head or a swing head jig, and the name makes perfect sense. It's basically an EWG that's attached to a football style head, but it's free swinging, right? Whatever bait you put on it is gonna have a lot of free motion. Now, the majority of guys, and the way it was actually classically presented, is you put like a beaver or a creature style bait on it. Well, I wanna use it for like a straight tail, kind of like girthy style finesse worm, right? And one of the problems is that EWG is not the hook I want to be using. I want to use like an O'Shaughnessy or a straighter shank offset shank hook. There's a product called a wrecking ball. It's basically, Gambler makes it. It's a football style head that has these two connectors on it. And what it allows you to do is sort of customize this wobble head or this swing head and use any hook that you want. So what you're gonna need is a decent split ring pliers. I like the ones for the mini split rings. They just seem to work better. And then you're gonna take your split ring and you're just going to split it just like that and get it started. Then you're gonna grab your head. Now you want to use the tab that's flat on that football head, not the one that's pointed up that kind of runs parallel with the head. You're just gonna slide that thing on, take your time with it, otherwise you end up like shooting split rings across the room, you run out of split rings really fast, and it's really frustrating. Now the hook that I wanna use, you guys have seen it a whole bunch before, it's just an owner worm hook. I think this is the 5/0 size, just your standard O'Shaughnessy hook. And all you're gonna do is open that split ring up again. There's one real big key to this process though, and that key is the hook point needs to point upwards parallel or the same sort of like orientation as the eye that you're going to tie onto on that football head. So just make sure of that, otherwise this rig is not going to work out. Once again, take your time. You just use that split ring pliers to slide that thing on and thread it on, and then you just roll it right through that eye right there of your hook, and it should click right into place just like that. So you want that hook point pointed upwards so it works in the same orientation as that line tie right there. Then it's just kicking it old school, boys. You're just gonna thread your worm on just like a standard Texas rig through the head, bring it out, and then slide that thing down, get that little shank right in there, and then Texpose or whatever you want to do, bury the hook depending on the cover that you're fishing. Now the one thing you want to make sure of, you notice that we covered up the shank of the hook, but we did not cover that connection between the split ring and that wobble head or that football head. It's really important that you do not have that plastic push up against there, because the big key operating function of this thing is that free swinging sort of fluid motion. And that's what separates it from all the like the direct tie style worm rigs. So a couple key things. This is a hard bottom presentation. You know, a football head, it's perfect around gravel, around rocks, around shell like we have on the Tennessee River. It's good around brush, around stumps. This is not a grass rig, right? You wanna fish around, even though it's weedless or snagless, you wanna fish around hard style cover, dude. That's where it's perfect. It rolls over those rocks, rolls over those stumps, rolls through that brush. I've actually caught absolute giants in Florida fishing this on brush piles. It's a sneaky way to kind of vary the worm and show them something kind of different, behaves different, has that kind of fluid motion. Now, dragging it is obviously, you know, a go-to option. You treat it just like you would a shaky head or a Texas rig, and you're just kind of slow dragging it, keeping that bottom contact, and that bait is just kind of waving as you kind of slowly drag it. And especially if you're using maybe like Elastec plastics or something like that on the back, it's going to float up as well. This is one of the sneaky ways to do it. And this is the way like Tommy Biffle and a lot of guys who brought this technique out, is what they'll do is they'll throw it out and they almost treat it like a square bill or a crankbait, but kind of slower. So what you'll actually do is throw it out. It reminds me kind of what we're doing with a menace when we're swimming that plastic, but instead of swimming it over the top of these fish in these shallow flats, these grass flats for like staging, as well as kind of post-spawn fish, maybe chasing shad, chasing brim, we're actually fishing it along the bottom and we're retaining bottom contact, but we're gonna reel this thing. So you throw it down there, you sink it down. This is why I recommend using like 15-pound fluorocarbon. You don't want to get too heavy unless you're around some super big fish or some super thick cover, because you want this thing to stay down. And basically you're going to throw it out and you're going to kind of slow reel it, dude. Give it kind of like a little bit of a pulse maybe from time to time, but the goal is to keep that head kind of walking along the bottom and just rolling along that hard cover. And what you get is sort of this wobbling, this free sort of motion going back and forth with whatever plastic you put on the back. It has this sort of flex, dude. You put a big plastic like on there and you can see even just holding the plastic, it has all this like dangleability, as I'll call it. That's going to wave as you go and reel that thing. As it hits cover, it's almost going to deflect and create this sort of waving, or this, maybe not a darting out, but a little bit of kind of a swaying, hunting out action. That's completely different, because these guys, they don't usually reel a worm when you're talking about deeper fish. They'll do it with a swimming worm, but rarely do these fish actually see a worm that's not being dragged, right? They always see everything kind of in that slow pause or that pop pop kind of deal. This is just a steady, slow, almost like a slow rolled swim bait retrieve that keeps contact with the bottom. And especially if you're on like crankbait fish that are really tight to the bottom, it's a perfect way to mimic that presentation, but at a much slower, more finesse-oriented pace. A couple key things, and they really relate to if you're slow rolling or kind of reeling this thing across the bottom. I showed you guys this, and a lot of you guys use these screw-in style blades. I think this is the Keith Pochet version. There's a lot of different variations out there. Since this bait is continually moving, when you do that slow reeling kind of presentation, don't be afraid to cut the tail off, or if you get like a tail bit off of a worm, screw that thing in, dude. But you still have to keep it on the bottom. You have to be a little careful, and that kind of leads to the next point. So you got to play around with your weights, right? A lot of times I'm fishing with some current, as well as the fact that it's probably like 10, 15 foot of water. So either you need to slow down your retrieve, especially if you're using the blade, it's going to give you some lift on that bait. These little Keith Pochet ones, they don't do it too bad, but the bigger blade you get, the more lift it's going to cause, which is also going to cause that tail to stand up a little bit. Kind of a cool little trick. But you need to play with the weight that you're going to use. So you're balancing, trying to fish as light as you possibly can, but you also want to keep this thing on the bottom and keep that bottom contact. Imagine it a lot like a slow rolled crankbait, or like a swim bait that you're trying to just tick the bottom with. You're trying to keep just enough weight to keep that bait down, but not overpower it so it looks unnatural. I thought you guys would dig this, dude. That's what mail call does to me. You know, I get something in the mail and I'm like, oh, these are cool baits. And then my mind starts freaking racing and I'm like, how can I catch more bass on them? How do they apply to what I'm doing right now? And that's exactly what I was thinking. These fish are moving offshore. You know, they're in those mid depths as well as deep, but they really like these hard spots. You know, there's a lot of fish in the grass. There's a lot of new grass growth, but at the same time, if you can take advantage of some of these first fish moving out with some different presentations, they're seeing a lot of Texas rigs. They're seeing a lot of Carolina rigs. They're seeing a lot of crankbaits. You know, sometimes you have to slow down. And what this presentation allows you to do is combine some of those techniques and some of those presentations into one kind of sneaky thing that I think is either a little older or OG than a lot of guys remember, or guys just aren't using it on the lake a lot, because I get a lot more bites on this than I do a Texas rig when I can throw it. Obviously in the grass, not super viable, but on those hard spots, absolutely killer. Hope you guys dug this, dude. I'll put links to all this stuff down in the description box. Monster Bass, Tackle Warehouse for you guys to check out. If you guys got any tweaks or sneakiness that you can add to this, or ways that you fish a wobblehead or mod a wobblehead to do some funky things this time of year, drop them down in the comments. I love hearing what you have to say, and I always take away from it, dude. But we'll see you later. I'm gonna give Bog a pat for you. I wanna go fishing, bro.